All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at Lesson 10.7, or the warm-up for Lesson 10.7. So just as a reminder, if you have not taken notes and watched the video for Lesson 10.7, don't waste your time watching this warm-up. Okay, it's not going to do you any good. Also, please make sure that you try this warm-up before watching this video. Otherwise, again, it's not going to give you that confidence on determining whether or not you really know the content that you need to know for this assignment and on the quiz and on the test. So go ahead and pause this video if you haven't done the warm-up yet. But otherwise, if you're still watching this video, I'm assuming that you have watched the notes or taken notes and you have attempted this warm-up. So let's go ahead now and look at what the solutions would be. All right, so here's the key. So for numbers 1 and 2, it says a binomial experiment is described. We want to find the mean number of successes and the standard deviation of the number of successes. Remember, when we're dealing with a binomial experiment, that means we only have two possible outcomes, a failure or a success. And so in this situation, they just give it to us pretty straightforward, that there's 40 trials and the probability of success is 0.6. So we would just find the mean. We would just take the number of trials, n, times the probability of a success, p, so 40 times 0.6 would be 24. So the mean would be 24. The mean number of successes would be 24. And the standard deviation is the square root of n times p times q. So the number of trials times the probability of a success times the probability of a failure, and we take the square root of that product. So in this situation, again, we have 40 trials, so n is 40. The probability of success is 0.6. It means the probability of a failure is 0.4. So when you multiply those together and take the square root of that product, we get approximately 3.1, or you could have said 3.098 is your answer. Now for the next one, we have to do a little bit of thinking. So there's 25 true or false questions. So that means the number of trials in this situation would be 25. If it's true or false, we have a 50% chance of getting each one correct. So the probability of success would be 0.5. So 25 times 0.5 would be 12.5. Now the standard deviation, that would be the square root of n times p times q. Now if the probability of a success is 0.5, the probability of a failure is also 0.5. So we take 25 times 0.5 times 0.5 and the square root of that, and you get 2.5 as your answer. Now for this last one, we're going to go through this one together. This one takes a little bit more work, a little bit more thinking, and it's not quite as straightforward. So we know that, remember that the mean, whoops, let me get a pen instead of a highlighter. So we know that the mean is n times p. And we know the standard deviation is a square root of n times p times q. Now from this problem, we know that the mean is 72. And we know the standard deviation, n times p times q, the standard deviation is 6. So we got to figure out what the values of n and p are. Well, we got to think about this because going back up here, we know that 72 is equal to n times p. So that means that we can replace n times p in this other equation with 72. So we would have 6 equals a square root of 72 times q. Well, now we can solve this equation. So to solve this equation, if I wanted to solve for q, I would square both sides to get rid of the square root. So I'd get 36 equals 72q. Divide both sides by 72 and we get 0.5 or 1/2. We'll just say 0.5. So q is 0.5. Well, now to find out what p is going to be the other half. Well, if q is 0.5, the probability of a failure is 0.5, that means the probability of success would also be 0.5 because 1 minus 0.5 would be 0.5. So we found our value for p, 0.5. Well, now we got to figure out, well, what's n? Well, let's go back to what we had at the very beginning, because at the very beginning we knew that to find the mean we would take n times p. Well, and we know the mean is 72, and we know p now is 0.5. Well, if I divide both sides by 0.5, I get n, and that would give you 144. So that's how you would go about finding n and p. So it requires us to understand these concepts and know kind of how to plug different values in, but this is a really good concept to make sure you're familiar with because it's a good conceptual problem. Hint, hint. Well, with that, hopefully you understand or hopefully you feel more confident going into working on today's assignment. So good luck as you continue to work on that and finish out this chapter.